class 3 of 8 of the Spirit-led Body Discernment. And it has an addition in it that we've never covered before in any of the other videos. So class 3 of 8 covered self-empowered wellness with Spirit-led Body Discernment, testing everything that goes into the body, including food and herbs and other things. So a quick review of classes 1 and 2. And that included the principles that also apply to today's lesson. Finding truth for what's best for your specific body, using your Spirit-led Body Discernment, practicing it daily on something that matters, and that's what's going into your body, your food, chemicals that you might put on the outside of the body, those kinds of things. And then building your trust by following what you learn, even if it doesn't seem to make sense to your logical or your habitual mind. And so just doing what the Spirit tells you to do so that you can build the trust in it. The overview for this topic is test everything that goes into your body, because everything that goes into your body affects your wellness. We experience rapid rebuilding and improvement in our wellness when we get just the materials we need. So we test our daily food and drink, we test our herbs or supplements, and anything that goes on to or into the body. The principles that govern this one: God is our designer, and we're the steward of the body. We've covered that before, but that principle is really so foundational to what we're doing. And if it's made by God, it's designed for us. If it's made by man, it's not designed for us and not good for us. So we look for natural products, things that are actually from natural things. We don't take in man-made toxins or sprays onto our skin, or we don't put man-made toxins or sprays on the ground that we grow our food in, because it damages the ground also. In-season foods are best because they provide the best nutrition, and we do it in its whole form. And I'll cover those a little bit deeper in some of the other areas of this presentation today. One point is food is perfect to practice daily on because God designed us, and God also designed the plants, the food, the materials, so that they will be the best for us and they won't damage us. God also designed our body to be extremely resilient. So when people go, but I don't know if I'm always getting the right answer with what I'm testing in my food, and I say, just do it, because you've already been eating just based on habit, and you recognize that it didn't make you ill based on habit. So eat based on your body temple, your Spirit-led Body Discernment testing, and you're resilient enough that even if you're wrong in that testing, it's going to be the best thing for you, because we're resilient enough to get a little bit of the wrong once in a while. And that means if it doesn't make sense, if you get an answer that doesn't make sense in your food, it's probably a good idea to follow it anyway, as long as you're following the correct principles and not man's advertising. In other words, we're still getting wholesome, in-season, fresh food. And if it's the wrong fresh food, it's still going to make your body work the best, because so follow even if it doesn't seem to make sense at that moment. The other principle I will only mention briefly right now is eating a little bit too much is harder on the body than eating a little bit too little. So if it feels like you're full, follow the feeling and just go, I'll be fine. I don't need to eat the rest of that. And that really does make a huge difference on how quickly we rebuild, because if we get too much, the body ends up being slugged down or slowed down by the too much. Temple quality materials for our body. From 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20, it says, "Do you not understand that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit that is in you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were purchased with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body." That's from the New Standard Version, I think, not King James. So I'm going to cover briefly 3 levels or 3 ways to take in or test our food. And I've used each of these level or methods. Currently, I'm using method number 3, but they all 3 work. The first method we'll cover is put in only original equipment manufactured, God-made parts into your body. Learn the best quality principles and follow those best quality principles. So that's level number 1. Level number 2 is test for and eat your personalized temple quality foods, and then you retest each season to keep it seasonally based. And level number 3 is apply level number 1 to a daily application. In other words, test what your body needs each day to get the precise building materials you need each day. So we're going to cover first level number 1. Put in only original equipment manufactured God-made parts into your body and learn the best quality principles to govern that. First, the principle. Found in Doctrine and Covenants, section 89, verses 10 and 11. And again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs, that means plants, all wholesome herbs, God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man. I've mentioned in other videos, that word ordained is so powerful. God actually set them apart, ordained them to build our body. And every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof, all of these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. So let's not limit our food to the 2 or 3 favorite ones. Let's remember that God said all herbs, all fruit, all wholesome plants are to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. It means variety is there also. Wholesome food is OEM parts. That's kind of a weird title, but God, being the designer of our body, put only original equipment manufacturer, that's taking it from the automotive industry, OEM parts title, to put into our body. God designed plants to rebuild your body, so putting in only plants in their whole form and as God designed it and known by you using your spirit-led body discernment testing for what your body needs, it provides the exact OEM parts for the repairs that your body requires right now. I have found that if someone puts in man-made parts into their bodies, it is not an exact replacement part. Using God-made parts works to rebuild your perfect body perfectly. Man-made parts often creates some pretty significant problems. And man-made parts can include processed foods, chemically treated foods, or things like surgery, or even for me, was dental work that did a pretty significant amount of damage, and other things that are man using man's wisdom instead of God's wisdom. I'm grateful we're each in charge of that. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And in the scriptures, we have some interesting scriptures that are almost the same as that. Ezekiel 47:12 said, and the fruit thereof shall be for food, and the leaf thereof for medicine. Or in Revelations 22:2, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. So we've got scripture that Hippocrates may have taken his idea from. I test everything that goes into the body, including what goes into the body by my eyes, by my ears, by my nose and mouth, by skin, by our emotions, and through any other senses that we have. So let's stop the things coming in that would actually slow us down or take us out of balance with the Spirit being able to guide us. A little note on how to word those statements before we jump into it. If we word it as a statement, it might sound like this apple is good for me, where it's worded as a question, is this apple good for me? Or as a statement, I am hungry, and we get a yes or a no to that. Or am I hungry? We can get a yes or no to that. But using statements seems to be more effective as a habit, where it's not critical at this point. It will be easier as you continue to progress. And getting used to testing what goes in supports bringing in just temple quality materials into our body. So,
Brett, did you
yes,
just use an I am rather than a question?
that was just as an example. Am I hungry? Or I am hungry? Yes. A
Oh,
statement, I am hungry. Uh,
it,
that may actually tell the body to be something. You're right. My body's hungry would be probably a more open statement on that one. So good point.
so statements are better than questions.
Yes. Over
Okay.
the long term, statements are better than questions. Step number 2, testing for and eating your personalized temple quality foods and retest each season. So I have a 560 food spreadsheet, which I will include with as a download with this. We test it in 3 levels. We test for toxic, neutral, or temple quality. And toxic are things we never want to hit our body because they actually do cause a toxic reaction and take a lot of energy to clear out. And so it's helpful to know that those things are toxic. And man-made things pretty much always test in the toxic area. Level number 2 is neutral. Those things are not beneficial to us, but they aren't toxic either. We try and take very little of those in, though, because they do take energy from the body while they're not nourishing. Level number 3 is temple quality, and I'll demonstrate this in just a second. And we eat those that test level number 3 or temple quality. And I try and only eat level number 2, neutral, if it's in a whole dish that tests 3 as a whole dish. In other words, let's say onions on a specific day are not temple quality for me. I've had too many onions. I don't need any more, but there's a little teeny bit in this dish. And the whole dish tests as temple quality. Then those onions aren't going to drag me down because the whole dish, the whole casserole, or the whole soup or whatever tests as temple quality. I have a spreadsheet that has 560 foods on it, which you'll be shared to you. You'll notice that it has categories all the way from fruit, vegetables, legumes, grains, flours, and breads, fats, oils, nuts, and seeds, meat, poultry, and seafood, condiments and sweeteners, spices and cooking, and beverages. What I'd like to do is take just 2 minutes to demonstrate how that testing is done and then how we use it. You'll notice in the middle of that is the 1 equals toxic, 2 equals neutral, and 3 equals best temple quality. And
You can test me, Fred.
okay, thanks, Debbie. We're going to start with acacia berry. And this is the way I'm going to test. Connected to Debbie. Energy is flowing forward. Yes and no are clear. All right. I'm going to test starting at 2 because a 2 is neutral. If it is at least a 2, it means it at least is not toxic. Then I only have to ask 1 or 2 questions per 560 items. So I'm going to be 700 to 800 questions at the most. And I can do that as long as I can test with one hand and record with the other, or someone else is recording. I can do that in roughly an hour to an hour and 15 minutes for the entire 560 items. And so can each of you. So that's why I'm testing only 1 or 2 per, and you'll see how this goes. So acacia berry is at least a 2 for Debbie. That's a 0. Apples canned are at least a 2 for Debbie. Yes, but not a 3. Recorded a 2. Apples dried are at least a 2 for Debbie, yes, but not a 3. Apples fresh are at least a 2 for Debbie, at least a 3. Yes, that's a 3. I'm recording a 3. Apricots canned are at least a 2. That's a 0 right now for Debbie. Apricots dried are at least a 2, at least a 3. No, a 2, but not a 3. Apricots fresh are at least a 2, at least a 3. Yes. Avocados are at least a 2, at least a 3. They're a 2. Bananas dried are at least a 2, a 3. No, a 2, but not a 3. Bananas fresh are at least a 2, a 3. So you'll notice if I get a yes for a 2, I don't know if you can see my hands as little as showing on this right now, but if I test for yes on a 2, I test again to see if it's a 3. If it's not, I record a 2. If it is yes, I record a 3. So it's either a 2 neutral or a 3. We've got enough there to demonstrate that if we were to record fresh apples, fresh apricots, fresh bananas, a lot of the others are available to eat without toxins, but we find that they're not going to build the body with the perfect materials. They're just going to be food at this point. So I'm going to show a tested one, a sample where we tested everything. And this is a real one. And what I've done is I've then recorded everything that was at 3. And you focus on eating those 3s for the next how many ever months it tests for. So when we get finished with it, we actually test for how long it's good for. And this particular one, if we test, how many weeks is it good for? At least 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is only good for 6 weeks because our season apparently is going into hard winter. And while these things are still good for Debbie, they won't be good very long. And then we put 6 weeks in here and we calculate out how many weeks that is going out. It's somewhere in the middle of January. I jumped in and calculated it by just asking a question. Take the 10th of December and add 6 weeks, and Google gave me back exactly a number. So you can see how quickly we can get those things to work for us on the foods that we are eating. Let me jump back into the presentation and see if in just a few minutes I can wrap up just this part of it. So that's level number 2. Test and personalize your temple quality foods and then retest each season. Level number 3, which I'm using right now, is test what your body needs each day to get the exact proper building materials that you need each day. And this is what I found rebuild the body the fastest for me. But my wife does not use this. My wife uses level number 2 most of the time, and sometimes just level number 1, and it's working just fine for her. So to test exactly what's needed each day, we would use statements like, this apple is good for me, or this food is temple quality, this apple is temple quality, or I need this apple today, something like that, and just being very broad in what we test. The variety principle means that I am going to test all the categories of food when at each meal. Now, some people may find this too cumbersome, but I've got so fast at it that it's actually easier for me to get exact materials that come in. So in this meal, I need, and I just test through fruit, vegetable, nuts, seeds, grains. And then I test the options that I know we have in the house that meet level 1 category to make sure they're all healthy. It works to test for breakfast. It works to test for lunch. My wife typically makes lunch. I make my own breakfast. I do check to see if something she's made is temple quality for me today. And she doesn't get offended if I don't eat everything that's in the offering. It almost always is. But she knows that I test everything, so she doesn't get offended. And sometimes it's for dinner because I just didn't need it at that moment. One of our habits that may be challenging is that we may be overwhelming our food with too much of a good thing. And that's why the variety is so critically important and changing things out on a daily basis. Because if we eat the same thing over and over again, we're going to get the same materials in, and we just don't need those materials over and over again. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll look forward to talking to you then.